This week's show brought to you by Babies. They're Donald Trump's kryptonite. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez. We're deep in the off season, so luckily we have the three of us. Patrick Minton, you're back on NBA Geek. Say hey.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
And as always, we're produced by our own voice of God, Brian Foster. You can find him on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Anything goes wrong with the show, he's the person to blame. Brian, give a shout out.
That's right. Send all your blame this way. And yeah, I'm kind of bleeding into Patrick's box a little bit this week. He's not on camera, but that's okay. For the audio listeners, all three of us are here.
I think Patrick, as the basketball coach, would agree that it's a good thing for you to box out. That's just one of the fundamental things. Yeah. So there we go. All right, so this week's show, Brian, I have one topic I want to discuss, an article I wrote this week on bad NBA contracts and also LaMarcus Aldridge. I want to get some sanity checking from other geeks, Patrick, you in particular, because I got some major cognitive dissonance about the Spurs here. And then additionally, we're probably going to talk some Olympics, and we may go political because, candidly, if you're not watching politics right now, I don't know how you're on the internet. I don't know how you found this. I don't know how you found this podcast, this live stream, if you haven't seen just the slew of amazing, terrible, whatever you want to call it, politics. So, Patrick, first question. I'll see if you did your homework. Did you catch the article I wrote on the worst contracts in the NBA?
I skimmed it. Unfortunately, I did not catch all of it.
I don't care if you read, candidly, if you just read the 10 names, I don't care if you read, the fill-ins, because I have no complaints about list form articles on the internet when they're well-researched or well thought out. They're some of my favorites. Cracked is my favorite site. But obviously how that article came about is I did a bunch of research, I made a list, and then after I made the list, I'm like, well, you have to fill in each block. And we've talked enough that I know that you could probably even just guess all of the random platitudes or insults or whatever I was going to hurl to each player.
The one thing I do remember thinking about that at the time, and I'm trying to pinpoint it right now, is that the Gallinari contract doesn't seem as bad in the new salary cap structure, right? I mean, it's kind of I would compare it to like an $8 million contract in the last salary cap.
Yeah, he was really weird in that, when I debated a lot putting him on the list, but the reason he made it on the list is he was just so bad the year before he got that contract, and then he had been injured the previous season. So what was somewhat, egregious to me is just signing a player to a long-term deal. And he was on the old salary cap, so it's not the new one. Signing a player to,
that was the old,
yeah, that was the old salary cap. But giving the most money on your team. And so that was the methodology. There were some comments. I don't think everybody understood it. The article, is called The 10 Worst Top Contracts in the NBA. And basically you go team by team and you look for the highest paid player on the team. And then you ask yourself, is this a good contract or a bad contract? At least that's what I did. So for instance, Kevin Durant next year in the 2016-2017 NBA season is the highest paid player on the Warriors. I think I said that right, although I think maybe I tongue twisted it when I listen back. I'll see if I messed that up. But I've got no complaints with that, right? Kevin Durant, a star, who cares? Same with, I think next year it wasn't even on there yet, but I think it's currently Kevin Love for the Cavaliers. I don't actually have a complaint with that, to be honest, because when he signed the contract,
that's obviously going to change as soon as LeBron signs his, right?
I agree with that, but I'm also saying the other part of the methodology about what I did is I didn't look at their performance last season and then compare that to how much they're getting paid and say good or bad. We've done that a lot. There are a lot of articles that do that. And the problem with that is players get injured or maybe players age. So, you signed a star player. Dwayne Wade, before his last two contracts, is a great example. Dwayne Wade's a player that's declining but still had something left in the tank. So if you signed Dwayne Wade to a 4-year, $20 million contract, if you get good performance the first 2 years, medium performance the third year, and bad performance the fourth year, I don't actually have a complaint with you signing to that contract because you signed a star for 2 years. And then, overall, it kind of balances out. The problem I have now is if you sign Dwayne Wade to a 2-year contract now at $20 million a season, which, the Bulls did, that's the problem. So I put those two parts together, and when we were talking Danilo Gallinari, that's what happened. When they signed him, the type of contract they gave him, based on his performance and age, I just wasn't thrilled with. a bunch of the other names, I don't think I really got many complaints. The only thing people had is that there might have been some worse contracts on the team, which I don't disagree with. For instance, Harrison Barnes on the Mavericks is probably a worse contract than Dirk Nowitzki, because Dirk Nowitzki is only 2 years.
But he's
Harrison
just
Barnes,
paid slightly less, right? That's why he didn't make the list.
Yes, so that's why Dirk gets the win this next season. Harrison Barnes is in the running. At least that was, the article I put together. There, whenever you want to make a top 10 list of worst paid, best paid, whatever, there are lots of criteria you can give, and this was the criteria I did. And we actually talked about this on last week's show, Brian. Namely, this came about looking at players like Brad Beal and CJ McCollum, and players that were starting to get these huge deals on their teams, and you just went, what was going on? All right, so the one player, and Patrick, I'd be really curious if you agree, I think you do, is LaMarcus Aldridge. Even after digging into all the numbers, I just don't think I can justify the Spurs doing this deal. Now, obviously, hindsight bias is cheap. Last season, he played about what he needed to justify the contract. And if we buy a little more improvement, if he plays a little more like he did towards the end of last season than the beginning, he's completely worth the contract. But based on all the data we had when he signed, I just don't know if I can agree with San Antonio making a good move signing LaMarcus.
I'm always just hesitant to think that we know better than Pop or Richard Buford. They are like literally the only two, they're the only front office in basketball where I could say they are probably better at evaluating talent than like a random, like very good statistician would be. So I don't know. I mean, so we always say that like in a front office, the stats and the coaching should sort of play together, but you can kind of tell which front offices just ignore the stats, or at least to pay attention to the wrong stats, right? And they do everything by the seat of their pants. They do everything by their sort of old school methods of talent evaluation. And the reality is that like a good advanced stats department is going to crush a team that does that every year in and year out. But then you look at like the way it seems that it should be done in San Antonio, where you have really smart basketball people and really smart stats people kind of working together. And I think one of the keys is that the smart basketball people are totally open to having their minds changed by the smart stats people. And Pop has even gone on record talking about that before, about how, some guys talked to him about rebounding versus field goal defense and which one is more important, and they changed his mind. And the mere fact that he's open to having his mind changed in situations like that is probably indicative of why this front office is like, light years ahead of everyone else. So honestly, I wouldn't put him on this list just because I'd be like, they maybe saw something in how to utilize him that Portland's coaching staff did not see, and I could totally buy that. Like, well,
and I was just going to say, we have a cheat code because we do have, I didn't write this article right after he was signed. We have a season after, and he had his best, he had his career best. And one of the interesting things about San Antonio, which kind of goes contrary to how we normally discuss basketball teams, is, we're very much sign good players. And usually you can use the stats to identify who the good players are. You can look in college and see who the good players are. You can look in the NBA and year to year know who the good players are. The Spurs, though, do seem to have some knowledge of system. The example I'll give back, and so I'm kind of arguing with myself here, obviously, Patrick, is Marco Bellinelli, where Bellinelli clearly had skills at shooting three-pointers. And the Spurs said, we can use that. And so Aldridge almost seems like they went to the market and said, we need a 7-footer who can play good defense and work within our offense. And the only reason I'm not 100% sold on Aldridge is that Robin Lopez was on the market at the same time. And that's the only real question I have, is if they had a shot at Robin Lopez, or if they, for some odd reason, thought LaMarcus Aldridge was better than Lopez.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know what to add to that other than it comes down to whether or not, you are just relying on the numbers, or if you recognize that, okay, they probably saw something in him and how they could use him and how he could fit into their system. The Bellinelli is a good example because they clearly said, we need you for this one skill. We don't want you to do this other bullshit that you do in the other teams. We just need you for this one skill. And he was amazing. And I'm going to assume they had similar discussions with LaMarcus Aldridge. They're like, we want you to do this, that, and this other thing. We don't want you to do, B, C, and D, right? That doesn't lead to success.
And yeah, it for the most part seems to work. Although the one thing I'll note is I looked at LaMarcus Aldridge's shot charts last year and the season before, and he went up across the board in shooting efficiency last season, and that's fine because actually when you look at basketball statistics year to year, what you find is the most variable statistic is shooting efficiency, even free throw shooting. Of all the skills in basketball, shooting efficiency is the hardest to pinpoint year to year. If you have a player, Ben Wallace is a perfect example, and Dennis Rodman. These are two players that we thought were stars, and they're even better because the skills that they excelled at are the most consistent year to year in basketball. So not only do we think they're stars, you know what you're getting next season. I mean, James Harden is a fantastic example of a player that, we've thought he's a star, I think every year since his second or third season in the NBA. But how much of a star he is has varied greatly. Even Steph Curry, same example. These players are fantastic shooters that when they're at the top of their game, they're absolutely amazing. But there is no guarantee. There's no guarantee that Steph Curry is going to come back and shoot even more than 300, three-pointers, make more than 300 three-pointers next season, because that's those are some of the hardest stats to track. But LaMarcus Aldridge's shooting, he still seems like he loves those mid-range shots a lot. And they're just good. I mean, even this year on the Spurs, he didn't really crack them. If you look at what he does well, which is fine, we'd expect a 7-footer. All of his shooting efficiency comes from the fact that he shoots really, really well at the hoop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I'm still, I think the Spurs improved him, but I still think he's got some of that in love with the mid-range, what Ty Willingham's called the shit shots. And even on the Spurs, he still isn't cured of it. He's just better than he was before, and that's enough to tip him over, what our scales would call not worth the money to worth the money.
But then an old max contract just doesn't seem that bad compared to most of the contracts on your list from today, though, Dre, or yesterday.
Based on their performance last season, LaMarcus Aldridge on this list that I put together, he was the only one worth the money. Well, no. Last season, I would say he's the only one worth the money. None of the other players on this list. I gave some credit to Carmelo Anthony. I said in 2013, 2014, he played above average. He was an above average player. So as a result, that's why he's lower on the list. The Knicks signed him at his best, but none of the players on this list, with the exclusion of LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan, were above average last season. And DeMar DeRozan wasn't enough above average for me not to still think, that was an absurdly bad contract.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just some of the go ahead, Patrick.
No, I could see your point. I guess I just wouldn't have included him on the list yet.
Yeah, well, I'm fine with it because it's kind of what our normal philosophy here is. When you grade something, you really should grade it based on the information at the time. And again, what I like that you're doing is you're saying, and I'm fine, I'll put this in the script, and that helps a little because I after writing all this up, I really wanted to write a follow-up, and I still may write a follow-up on LaMarcus Aldridge. You're saying these other names on the list, we're probably not wrong. Our stats, our analysis is probably correct. On LaMarcus Aldridge, that's the one where you're going, I've made this comparison before. When you're analyzing the moves of a grandmaster chess player and you are not a grandmaster, instead of questioning why the grandmaster made that move and saying, what the hell are they thinking? You should flip the thinking and think, what the hell am I thinking and what am I not seeing?
I think that's a good way to put it, yeah. I would also say I think that the DeRozan contract is the worst one on here, not
Brad Beal. No, Brad Beal is worse.
Ooh, let's bring up the tool.
You know what? That's pretty close. Yeah. Damn, I didn't realize how bad Brad Beal is.
Oh, freak! The Wizards are in such horrible shape.
Some of the other ones people are asking about, just to get these out there. So Harrison Barnes, not the highest paid player on the team. It's Dirk, so he doesn't meet the criteria.
Although I do think it's a worse contract. I think it's a worse contract than Dirk.
I agree. Same with Derrick Rose. He's paid less than Carmelo Anthony, so he doesn't qualify. Also, it's only 1 year, so maybe it's
expiring, and honestly, at the time that he signed the contract, he was the reigning MVP. So
We didn't think he was MVP, but based on the age curve, what would have happened right there?
But yeah, sure. I mean, he was definitely a star player, and he was like 21 or something, and he was healthy, and I mean, it was a perfectly fine contract when it was signed.
Is it the same thing with Chandler Parsons on the Grizzlies? Is he paid less than Mike Conley, so he doesn't get in there?
Yeah, Mike Conley. I don't know if this is still true. I think it might be. I think has the richest contract, or is the first player in NBA history to sign a contract that rich, like $30 million a year over 5 seasons.
He's a really good player, but his health might be the issue with him.
He's a very good player, but wow, that's crazy. Yeah. This is one of those scenarios where, like, this whole offseason, people are the players are sellers and the GMs are buyers, and it is a seller's market because all the GMs have money. And the smart GMs were like, okay, I know I'm supposed to spend the money and I have to spend the money, but that doesn't mean I have to lock myself into 5 years of a bad contract. Or even like with Conley's contract, it's not necessarily a bad contract, but I mean, I'm guessing in 3 years it's going to look like one.
Yeah.
Like,
at his age,
the way the the NBA works is you're going to get 1, maybe 2 max players, and if you want to win championships, those max players better be MVP caliber players. If they're not, then why are you giving out max money? Right?
And I think we've discussed this a little. I don't mind overplaying a player like Conley, because Conley, it's not just that he's good. He's not quite star anymore, though he's had some star seasons. He's very good. And if you think you're close, like if you already have LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, and you've got like 1 or 2 more seasons to get them, to get that title, fine. But I don't think the Grizzlies were in that position. I think they panicked because of all the injuries last season. And they didn't want to lose their best player.
Yeah, but it's just that contract. It's like they're paying him the same money that you're paying LeBron, right? And
probably more. I mean, probably more, because I think LeBron James to stay on the Cavs. I think he's not going to take a long deal, right? I think he's going to take a 1-and-1, which Adam Silver was denouncing, which is really weird to have. I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get down that rabbit hole, at least right now. But yeah, he's got it. I think he's got the richest contract in the NBA, though. I'll take a look at Basketball Insiders and see if they.
I thought Durant will.
Oh, Durant might. But they didn't have his bird rights, so I don't think Durant's going to exceed Conley, because they had Conley's bird rights as opposed to Durant, who had to take a pay cut to go play with the Warriors on a new contract instead of getting bird rights.
Yeah, I may be wrong about this, but. I really dislike the Conley contract. It's like, you got enough money for if you sit and you bide your time, you can buy yourself, a really nice car like a Tesla or something, and instead there are no Teslas available, so you go out and you buy like a nice VW.
Oh, if you're in the NBA, you're getting Bentleys, I think, not Teslas.
Well, yeah. Maybe, but I mean, well, okay. Let me go back. Maybe go back to my Picasso analogy, right? Like,
oh yeah,
if you want a Picasso, you got to wait for one to come on the market. You can't just blow all your Picasso money on some random piece of art just because it's the only thing available, right? There are only a few Picassos, and you got to wait for one to come on the market.
Are there any artists you don't like that you want to throw under the bus right now?
Artists?
No, I'm joking.
Oh. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not really very knowledgeable about like sort of those middle of the road artists.
It's still a great analogy.
Like, there are artists that like I don't know, what's an artist that you can buy a work for like $10,000 instead of $1 million.
And just for past reference, the Picasso analogy is that if you see a great trade in the NBA, you should just take it right away. You shouldn't wait and try to get something better if you think you can.
Trade or contract, yeah, like yeah.
But hang on, that's assuming that the player in question is a Picasso.
Exactly.
And what that means is it's a player that you could not so Picasso level players are like, we have 30 NBA teams, right? And the idea of Picasso players is that there are not at least 30 of them.
It was Kevin Love in your original example.
Yeah, and let's be fair, like the numbers Kevin Love was putting up at the time were different than what he was putting up last year, right?
Which is still pretty good.
And I'm not just talking about total numbers. I'm talking about per minute numbers and stuff like that. But at any given time, there are not enough Picasso players such that every team can have one, right? So if you have a chance to get one, you have to grab him. Like, you have to grab him now. You can't just wait for the next Picasso because there's 30 teams, but there's only like 20 Picassos. So, I mean, they're just I mean, Durant is obviously Picasso, right? If you can get Durant, you get Durant. You know, unless you have to give up another Picasso to get him, you just do it.
Well,
like,
and even in that example, like, you know,
but Mike Conley isn't the Picasso. Like, there are definitely players of Mike Conley's caliber that will be available every single offseason. There's no question. And he's a good player. He's a really good player. I'm just saying there are going to be really good players available every offseason, either via trade or free agency.
And for the audio listeners, I do have the DeRozan and Beal stats up next to each other in the comparison tool right now. And DeRozan did have a slightly above average season last year, but Beal he did not have a good season. So with similar contracts for those guys, yeah, it does seem like the Beal was worse than DeRozan to me anyway.
Yeah, but it's a low bar to clear, right?
Neither are something to write home about.
So, by the way, to finish up the notes I'll probably put for the show, Patrick, when I write this up, would you be fine with the following analysis from Patrick, saying Patrick would take LaMarcus Aldridge off the list, and you know, maybe not as high as 6, but definitely put Conley on the list instead?
I would, yeah. I think Conley's the worst contract.
All right,
I think even though Conley's a really good player, I mean, but he's really good. He's not fantastic, right? He's not a top 20 player. You know,
he's come close, but the other problem, and you know, the difference between him and Aldridge is he's a guard, and a guard versus a center in terms of the production they give you, it's much easier to replace the guard's production than the center's.
Yeah.
Am I crazy on that?
The argument has some merit, but I don't know if that's entirely true.
Well, because I guess what I'm saying,
because we have a position adjustment, right?
Well, yeah, but I'm saying to your point on Conley is a significantly above average guard, but he's not so much above. You know, whenever we look at guards that we really like, Chris Paul, James Harden, Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry. I can't believe Steph Curry was like the fourth one I thought of. Obviously, Russell Westbrook. Those players are so much better, and you know the numbers bear this out, that I don't, you know, you're not going to be able to replace any of them. Whereas I think, you know, it's a very moneyballish thing. I think you could get a good point guard and a good shooting guard combined that would probably replace Mike Conley and whoever, you know, the Grizzlies are just so beat up.
It seems like every year. It seems like every year there's a really good shooting guard, or sometimes point guard, but usually shooting guard. There's usually a good shooting guard who's like available that no one kind of wants, right? Or small forward or something like that. You look back at like guys like
Thabo Cephalosha.
Landry Fields is still out there.
Or Aminu, like you know, the year before that, or let's not bring up Landry Fields again, but well,
let's just be fair. Like he's injured. You know, it's a shame. They're players that, you know, we loved.
Right.
It always sucks when we love a player and they get essentially, I don't want to say career ending because he's still bouncing around, right? But they essentially get a production ending injury, and then people have to come up and say, well, you love this player. It's like, well, yeah, but guess what? You know, these are top caliber athletes. You know, if I have a top caliber car and its rear axle breaks and you can't repair that, I don't think it's a top caliber car anymore.
Yeah, I think that's
a good
fair.
car, Landry Fields. Well, so do we want to talk like other free agency at all, Dre? We've got these like available.
If Patrick does. I've talked so much at this point. So if Patrick, if you have anything you want to say on free agency, we can talk that. If not, we can go into Brian's topic, which is Olympics.
Yeah.
Let's move right on to Brian's topic.
Brian, I'm going to put you in the driver's seat because pre-show we were talking this. I wish I could care more about the Olympics, but I don't.
No, I'll talk Olympics. I'll just say on free agency real fast. You know, we got Random Name and other posts like that. I love the Warriors. Great signing JaVale McGee for a non-guaranteed deal. He was still one of the best rim protectors and shot blockers last year. So if he can, you know, man the center spot with Pachulia, that's great for the Warriors. But they signed Elliott Williams, who's never done anything in the NBA, to a partially guaranteed deal. So I don't know. Again, the Warriors process is weird, but the results are amazing. Same thing as always with the Warriors this week. And also Derek Fisher is going to try to do a comeback at age 42
yeah,
as a player.
I saw it. That's hilarious.
And I guess our only thing to say about this is he was not a good player when he was younger even. So I don't know.
He was an average. I mean,
yeah.
To our point on like team construction, Derek Fisher was an average point guard to a not expensive contract, which is a perfect piece if you have a couple of really expensive stars and you just need a not terrible point guard to, make sure, it's the Utah Jazz problem. The Utah Jazz for years had an amazing front court of some great players, and they didn't just have no point guard. They had like negative production at point guard. So it's kind of one of those. In his prime, he was a piece that fit, which is kind of our, what we were saying about the Spurs. Same idea, right? He's a cog that fits into a machine that needs him. 42, though, no, get out of here.
All right, so I'll go through the Olympics pretty fast, but I don't know. There's a lot to say about it. I guess so the heading I have for it in the script is that the Olympics are basically, let me get the exact phrasing I used here because I kind of stumbled on this. They're a one-stop shop for everything that's fucked up in modern sports, is what I said. So here's what I mean by that. For starters, they have a corrupt governing body, right? The IOC, like FIFA, like a lot of other bodies, where everyone's just kind of out there to get it for themselves. And so, I mean, we'll link all these articles about it, but yeah, I mean, there's a quote from this Australian newspaper here saying that the winning bidders are going to increasingly come from cashed-up authoritarian regimes unaccountable for the constituents for splurging on sports circuses. So, cities like Boston and I think Hamburg, Germany, are withdrawing their bids from upcoming Olympics. And they're going increasingly to Beijing. Again, it's going to have another Olympics after the one they just had. Of course, we just had Sochi in Russia. The Russian government just paid for all that. So, yeah, I mean, it's not looking good for the bidding process. And like we always say with sports stadiums in general, because what is all this money the Olympics are paying for anyway? It's to build 1 million stadiums and infrastructure in the cities. But it's even worse. They're just going to use them for a few weeks, and they're never going to use them again. The Brazil World Cup was a great example of this. They built a soccer stadium like in the middle of the jungle, I want to say, for that. You guys might remember that if you're following the World Cup.
There was no infrastructure. They had to take, I think, boats and helicopters to get there. And when it's done, okay, millionaire organizations that are sponsoring expensive teams can afford that. How is anybody that lives there, regularly, just normal folk, how are they going to afford to do that? So that was just ridiculous.
And I'll talk bad on Beijing again. The last time they had the Olympics, they built the Bird's Nest Stadium, if you guys remember that, and everyone said, oh, this is the most beautiful stadium ever. Well, that thing's been vacant and empty ever since the Olympics. So that, again, was just kind of like a spectacle for a few weeks. And so I guess good on the cities that are wising up and starting to turn away from the Olympics, but, it's still not great for the cities that do it. And of course, we always like to talk about the bullshit amateur rules. So for sports like the NBA, the pros can go, but for a lot of other sports, that's not the case. I didn't put this in the script, but I remember seeing that there's actually a documentary coming out about the women's boxer from the U.S. that got a gold medal, and I think she's boxing again. And she's, talking to the boxing federation and trying to be like, hey, I'm still an amateur. Should I just go pro and get paid? So I can't remember the name of the documentary. We'll dig it up, but it looked really interesting. And yeah, I mean, that's going on in a lot of sports, right? It's been that way for figure skating for a long time for the U.S., where the U.S. figure skaters go to the Olympics, get gold, and then they turn pro and finally make some money. So, we don't have to go over that again, but, you know how we feel about amateurism, quote unquote. And then the last thing is this whole doping scandal with the Russians. I guess, I don't know if they got reinstated or they didn't. I didn't follow the whole thing. I'm not totally studied up on this, but the federation was covering it up, and, it's the same old thing with doping in the other sports. It's just kind of a farce and a joke that they're testing for it, and it's just not working out. So, yeah, I mean, the Olympics, if you want to check off the lists of, all the different things that can go bad in sports, it has it all. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to say all this bad in the Olympics because I'm being a huge hypocrite. I'm going to watch every minute of it, and I love watching it. It's great. So, I don't know. The Olympics is kind of crazy. Like, it's, it's pretty bad, economically and politically. But at the same time, it is great sport. So I'll be watching it. That's kind of my rant on the Olympics. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that.
That covered all the bases, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I'm apparently in metaphor mode today, Patrick. I try and do you proud because I think you come up with the best ones, and I think your meme work when you write is the best too. But I was gonna say the metaphor for stadiums, I think, is kind of like people that buy pickup trucks. where
Ooh.
when you buy it, you can convince yourself of all of the great things you can do with it, and you maybe use it for that once. Now, I mean, I have farmers in my family. I live really close to a family that, owns a farm. Sure, they buy a pickup truck. I don't question why they need a pickup truck. But, when I live in the city and I live next to someone who has a pickup truck, I go, why did you buy that? You are only good for your friends that want help moving and don't want to pay, $29.99 for the U-Haul.
Or that one time you bought a couch.
Yeah. Well, Menards, I don't know how many times I bring it up on the show, Patrick, but I am absolutely in love with Menards out here. I think it's me becoming a Midwesterner. Menards does very reasonable delivery, so I've never had to worry about, like we bought a recliner at Menards. They just delivered it. Really reasonable, really easy to schedule, so I've never needed a pickup truck because of Menards.
I guess, okay, guys, as an add-on to my Olympics thing, do you want to get into the 2004 U.S. Olympic men's basketball team real fast? Because there was an article about that today that I liked, actually on NBCOlympics.com, and that was kind of interesting. The reason why I say I was surprised by that is that usually, when you watch the Olympics, the main TV broadcast, it's like, we're going to spend half an hour talking about how they grew up and interviewing their parents, and then we'll spend like 2 minutes on the actual event. But anyway, this is actually a really interesting article, so I'll just highlight it real fast. But basically, it went back and interviewed a lot of the players and journalists that were around at the time covering it, and yeah, they just picked the wrong roster. Larry Brown was probably the wrong coach, and there's just a lot that went into how bad that was, and they've definitely turned things around since then under Krzyzewski. Patrick, I think you seem like you want to talk about this on the pre-show a little bit. Maybe not.
About I think one of you brought up the 2004 team, which was just,
yeah.
And I'm sure this team is going to crush everybody, and I'm sure Carmelo Anthony is going to get a disproportionate acclaim for it.
To be fair, something
I think that happened last
bizarre is he plays very well in international play, and I think a large part is that they have the shortened three, and I think
huge part.
Yeah, we'll have to bring up the Olympic stats. I have to say, guys, when I was trying to look up Olympic stats in relation to this, I couldn't find shooting percentages in the stats.
But here's the thing, so it's not just him though. Kevin Durant may be an MVP in the NBA, but in FIBA, he just completely fucking breaks the game, right?
Well, the goaltending rules are different too, right?
Yeah.
Right, but I don't know if you guys remember last year, but Kevin Durant looked like he was shooting fucking free throws from that 3-point line, right? It was just, and the entire team, averages across the board were very high for the 3-point shooters, but Kevin Durant in particular was just insane.
Durant has been crazy good in the warm-up games they've been playing.
Because for him, that extra, what is it, 2 feet? It's 1.5 feet, maybe. I'm not sure what it is. It's really, really huge for a guy like him, right? And when you're 7 feet tall, and don't give me any bullshit about being him 6'9", he's 7 feet tall. In the FIBA game, there is nobody on any team that can guard that, right? The international teams don't have 6'9" athletic wing players that can guard, can guard Kevin Durant. It's just he completely breaks the game.
Oh, and by the way, Andrew Sutton says Real GM has all the NBA Olympic stats. I was looking on Basketball Reference, so check out.
So when
Real
you say
GM
that, and when you say that Melo is way better in the FIBA game, it's kind of so are all the players, right? They're all benefiting from that 3-point line, and I wouldn't say that he's anywhere close to being Team USA's best player, but that seems to be what he gets a lot of credit for.
Well, okay, here's one thing I'll give him credit for. He has always gone out for the Olympics. I think he's been on there, I guess it's only been 3 times, right? 2000, 2004, and 2008. He's always been Mr. Olympics. So he gets the participation medal.
So let me just diverge for a second. I used to really dislike Carmelo Anthony because he was such an overrated player. But I got to say, in the last 2 to 3 years, I've totally changed my mind.
Are you talking about his political speaking?
Just he as a person in general, the way he comports himself, the way he behaves, he's very professional. He's a consummate professional. I thought the one year, maybe it was last year, I'm not sure what it was, where he played injured and just so he could play in the All-Star game. That was a little iffy. Didn't really like that. But beyond that, I have nothing against his attitude and his professionalism, but that just doesn't make him as good a player as people seem to think he is, right? I mean, and he's clearly one of the more patriotic guys on Team USA, and you got to applaud him for that, sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talk, I think, maybe cognitive dissonance is not a bad subject, especially if we go politics, Brian. But, that's one of the roughest parts in sports for me is some of the players that I like the most in terms of their numbers. I mean, Michael Jordan's a prime example where every time I read about Michael Jordan behind the scenes, I do not like him as a person.
Yeah.
And that's just, that's just the way it goes. Even and it always just makes me roll my eyes whenever people like, JaVale McGee is called a head case and people question his attitude. And I go, you're not questioning JaVale McGee's attitude as a legitimate concern. You're doing it because his skills are getting 8 rebounds a game, not getting 20 points a game. If he was getting 20 points a game, one of the movies we always quote on the show, Patrick, is Bull Durham. And, it's that exact point. When you get 20 points a game in the NBA, whatever you do is eccentric. Before then, it means you're a slob. The original quote is like, you win 20 games in Major League Baseball, you're eccentric. So that I always get very bugged when people talk about attitude and, things like you're saying, professionalism, when really they just kind of go one way or the other. And I think to your point about Melo, it sounds like Melo, at least ranked compared to other NBA stars, star meaning like all-star, top paid, not necessarily what we'd call all-star, sounds like he'd be more fun to, order a pizza with, get a beer with than a lot of the other ones. But like you pointed out, unfortunately, that doesn't show up on the box score. That doesn't show up on what wins games.
Yeah.
And what I'll say on JaVale McGee, actually, Dre, I'm glad you brought that up. So it feels like the main reason he was brought over to the Warriors is because of Andre Iguodala, who was his teammate on your Nuggets not too long ago. And
why you remind me of the good old days, man? Why are you just making it hurt?
Well, the only thing I wanted to say is that Iguodala is quoted as saying that he thinks McGee is the most intelligent player he's ever played with in the NBA and one of the best teammates. Yes.
Wait,
because,
what?
sorry, not intelligent players, one of the most intelligent people outside of the game.
That's
and that
better.
He said his problem is he overthinks things on the court, and that's why he has the boneheaded plays sometimes. So it's just so interesting how his kind of on the court and off the court thoughts are so different. And yeah, that's all
you agree with that at all, Patrick?
That's all I have for that.
I mean, I've never played basketball seriously enough, but I've heard that refrain, and it does seem common where when you overthink things, it does make you more likely to do stupid stuff. And sometimes some of the best people at things are the people that seem dumb because they just get in a groove and they don't think themselves out of what they should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is true in every sport. If you are like, once you get good at something, you're doing it without thinking, and as soon as you stop to think, you're getting your own way, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't care how much he thinks. He still rebounds and blocks shots. So welcome to the Warriors, JaVale McGee.
All right. So, Patrick, anything else you would particularly want to discuss? We're before an hour, but I don't mind. It's the off season, so I don't really care if, we don't cram everything in. Brian's got a few other topics. Andrew Sutton has asked about evaluating MBG.
Yeah.
That one seems like a really long topic. So if you're interested in talking the right way to evaluate GMs, Patrick, we can do that for a little bit.
The off season, like this part of the off season, it's just kind of a snooze fest for me. I keep waiting for interesting things to happen, and the only thing I get is Donald Trump acting like a maniac. So.
Well, we can get into that. I'll talk about Andrew Sutton's point real fast, and maybe this will be a later discussion or article or something. But basically, what he brought up Stan Van Gundy. There's an article about him, and he said that he wanted to get Montejunas, and he couldn't get him, and he ended up getting Boban instead, who's a better player. So he's talking about basically process versus results, because we think Boban's a great player, and Monty isn't. So. Kind of what I got out of that is how do you evaluate GMs? So we've been talking about a lot about this with the Warriors, right? Their process versus is rumored to be sketchy versus their results, which are amazingly good. So my thought is I don't think there's a way to do it. There's just not a big enough sample size with actual moves that happen, and the information is so opaque by nature, right? Front offices are secretive, so. We could say, well, we know Popovich is a good GM. He's been around for a long time and has this big body of work. Most GMs have been around 5 years or less, have only made a small number of moves. I just don't know how we really can evaluate GMs from the outside.
The biggest problem I have about evaluating GMs on this point, I guess I'll let this be my last point and then let Patrick fill in if he has anything else, is every GM works for, and I'm just going to burn bridges, fine, because they don't listen to the show, Brian. Most owners are entitled rich people who don't know what they're doing in the NBA.
Well, fine. Let's say front offices then, not just GMs.
Well, no. I'm talking GMs. So here's the point. If you're at a job and you're middle management, which GMs essentially are, you answer to a higher up. You answer to a CEO, a CFO. And in most businesses, the people that get there are there because, they founded the company or they've got lots of experience, or they were brought in because people knew it. Even in the case of, owners and companies, typically what will happen is, some group will buy out a majority share and they can put, whoever they want as the leader of the company, right? That doesn't happen in the NBA. In the NBA, what happens is someone like Vivek Ranadive, a billionaire, says, I would like an NBA team. That would be fun. I've called it toy train sets, a big yacht, whatever metaphor you want to use there. Now he's in control of it. He has no accountability, right? The NBA is not going to kick him out. If anything, he's getting tax breaks and everything. So we don't know what that owner is telling the GM and the constraints they're hamstrung with. And we do know, this is rough, James Dolan, right, of the Knicks, is the best example. We have tons of owners who have no idea what they're doing, but really enjoy owning an NBA team, really enjoy being hands-on, and we don't know what teams are hamstrung with. And so I think that's the hardest part about evaluating GMs is we don't know how many times a GM said, let's trade, Steph Marbury, let's trade overrated player for blah, and they got blocked. And, like an example of one we do know is, I think it was Donnie Walsh with the Knicks. He acquires all of these assets. He gets rid of all of these bad contracts. And then, James Dolan comes in as like, we really need Melo. And, instead of waiting a season and just buying him right out, he trades all of these assets and all of this cap space for Melo. So
that was kind of amazing.
Yep. Should have helped out the Nuggets, but injuries just suck. Injuries.
It's funny you use the word amazing for that. It was for the Nuggets, I guess. Yeah.
All right, last topic that you brought up. It didn't sound like you wanted to add anything to that, Patrick. I guess NBA fans are more liberal, but according to Ethan Strauss, they're young and they don't vote. So
so he brought this chart in from. Oh, it's really small print, but we'll have the link. Yeah, it's an interesting chart.
It's one of the few things that I kind of like. The whole Bernie or bust thing had me in a rage for a bit, but then I realized, you know what? Those Bernie or bust fuckers, they weren't going to vote anyway. They weren't going to vote for Bernie because they're all like 22, and they weren't voting for Bernie. They're not going to vote for Hillary. Their non-vote now is not really going to be missed. So I'm kind of relaxing about that. For a while, I was kind of on a rage about that. But
I hope you're right. But yeah, did the Bernie or bust, the dissonance of saying we're going to vote for a third party. Yeah, you did a really good job, Patrick, and I apologize. So last week's show on the shout-outs, you weren't able to make the show, but you sent along a shout-out, and I proved that I'm very Ron Burgundy-esque in that if it's not on the script, I'll forget to say it. And you had this great video on explaining, kind of the issue with it's what's called the first past the post voting, which essentially is what we have in the United States. So
essentially, exactly is what we have in the United States.
All right, I'll say I use appropriate wording, but yeah. So essentially, if you've got like 4 candidates, we take whichever one gets the most votes, and they're the winner, and that can be problematic because essentially.
It's literally how Trump won the Republican nomination, right?
Yeah.
Because he garnered something like 38% of the Republican primary votes,
which is a tiny percent of the overall electorate.
Votes. Yeah. He just got more votes than all the other people that were in the race. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, shout out
past the post system.
Shout out to the Freakonomics podcast because they had one of my favorite types that they've done. They've done 2 of these now, which is like ideas that need to die, and this would be fun to do for basketball for us actually, but they did this one on politics, and they were talking about voting, and they said something that would be nicer as a voting scheme. I forget who, one of the interviewees said, if you were allowed to essentially do NBA MVP voting, where instead of just having one vote for a candidate, you're allowed to vote your number 1, your number 2, your number 3, and you do some kind of amalgamation of that. Because to that point, like it's what you're saying with Trump, for most people, they would say, Jeb Bush is my man. Jeb, Yahoo, Gun, Bush is my guy. But, Trump would be their 10th out of 9 candidates. So if they were allowed to vote other ones, then, that might not have happened. So that would definitely be interesting. And then one of the problems we have in elections is just how vicious the candidates get towards each other, to the point where even when someone like Obama is elected, I still have friends on the right that are like convinced that he's the worst thing ever, because during the selection process, right, all the other side was saying is how horrible he is. And obviously neither side's hands are clean of this. And that even makes it rough, where people are able to dig up quotes on Hillary from Obama back when they were going against each other, where he was saying she wasn't fit to lead, because that's the weird system we have, where instead of trying to prove you're the best, you're trying to prove the other person is worse than you.
Yeah, especially in this election.
Yeah, so they were saying, doing these, making sure, second, third place votes help, because then that way, if you think that you're not going to beat, Jeb Bush in the polls, but you still want his voters to give you their second and third place votes, you don't bash Jeb Bush because you don't want to alienate them. So I actually really like that idea. Who knows if it'll ever happen? Obviously, there some things about our political system that maybe should be changed. I don't know, though. I'm not a poli-sci guy like you, Brian, so no idea.
Well, there's a lot of upheaval in the DNC and the RNC right now. Those are the party organizations for the non-political people. So probably it's not going to lead to anything, but it is interesting times politically. And I guess the one thing I wanted to add is to explain the chart for the audio listeners, is it's voter turnout index, high versus low turnout in a group of people, versus Republican index minus Democrat, whether they're Democratic or Republican skew, with groups of sports fans, and then it also shows kind of how big the groups are. So really what this is saying is, are these sports fans, who do they vote for and how often do they vote? And it turns out golf fans are very conservative and vote a lot. College football and NASCAR are also very conservative. They vote a little bit less. And like you
this
were
is
saying
amazing.
Earlier,
WWE fans are even worse than NBA fans.
Yeah.
They're Democrat, which is definitely interesting for wrestling. Don't forget, wrestling's like one place where Donald Trump's shown up a lot. They don't vote at all. Wow.
WNBA is super liberal compared to all the other sports.
And women's tennis, WNBA and women's.
Women's
I
golf is very conservative versus the other women's sports, which is interesting. But here's the one thing I'll say about this chart that I thought about it is all the sports at the top. Let's put aside Republican and Democrat for now and just talk about turnout. All the sports at the top that with really high turnout are all the old people's sports. And all the sports at the bottom are all the young people's sports, like WWE, soccer. Even NBA is much younger than MLB and NFL. So I wonder if they took age into consideration. I bet they didn't, because
I'm sure they did not.
Yeah.
UFC is also low turnout.
Yeah, we were having this discussion pre-show where you have to be careful when you look at variables that they're not shadowing other things. And I think, right, where you can very easily you put a median age or a mean age in each of these dots, and I agree with you, Brian, where the more liberal and low vote turnout ones definitely have to be younger.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, this is an interesting link from Ethan Sherwood Strauss, and we'll attribute the original source in the notes.
Perfect. Well, I think I've said everything I want to. So Patrick, unless you have anything, I'm ready to go to shoutouts.
I got nothing left.
All right. So you got any shoutouts then?
I have a shout out, which is to Coach Nick, who took a break from basketball to have a guy on his podcast who was at a Donald Trump rally to talk about basically to give a first person account of the Donald Trump rally. And it's kind of scary. I'll be honest. It's kind of scary, but I don't know. I mean, it was definitely interesting. Jared Yates Sexton is the guy who was on B-Ball Breakdown on a particular podcast. I'll just retweet I think I may have actually retweeted this already, but I'll just retweet it again.
Retweet it time.
Yeah, it's truly frightening, to be honest. But
well, I think a lot of the things. I mean, there was one where the witch stuff, and then there was one I read about a woman whose son yelled something very about Hillary, and then she was saying, well, he should be allowed to say it, which there is freedom of speech kind of, but then I don't know. It scares me for a lot of reasons, and I'll give Dave Barry. I don't know. He wasn't the originator of it, but I saw through his feed a point about, people that do this stupid meme of, I can't tell which is worse, Hillary or Trump. And just the point that, the people saying that are not women, they are not minorities, they tend to be white males. And so, yeah, like from my perspective, as just a minority,
if you honestly can't tell which is worse, then please just don't fucking vote.
It's magnitude,
honestly,
right, guys?
Just
magnitude.
Fucking stay home if you really.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying that in a partisan way. I mean, I honestly, if the Republican Party hadn't in the last, basically since 1964, decided to adopt all the crazy racists, I might be a Republican. There's plenty of fiscal issues where I identify more with Republicans than Democrats, but I'm sorry, I can't be they just decided to adopt all the fucking crazy people who want to be all up in your face about all these social issues and on the wrong side of it. So I can't be Republican for that reason. But
100%.
But I'm generally not a partisan person, right? I mean, I honestly believe there are a lot of Republicans who aren't racists, who aren't bigots, and most of them, they compromise their principles a bit. They play to the crazy white people because they feel like that's how they get elected, right? I'm sure there are plenty of Republicans who, in their heart of heart, are pro-choice, but they get up on stage and announce themselves as pro-life all the time, right? So I get that there's crazy compromises in politics, right? So I'm not saying this and I'm not saying Hillary Clinton is great. I voted against her in 2008. I was a delegate for Washington State. I
really?
literally didn't want Clinton in the White House because I don't want another oligarchy, right? The same reason I didn't want George Bush's son in the White House. I didn't necessarily need to have Bill Clinton's wife in the White House. I'm there's 300 million people. Let's find somebody who didn't have a fucking relative who's a former president and elect them. But I mean, I'm not saying this as a Hillary shill or anything. If you honestly cannot tell the difference, if you honestly cannot tell which of these is worse, if your partisanship is so fucking bad that you're just going to turn a blind eye to the absolute batshit crazy stuff that Trump is doing, which has no place in politics, no place in the presidency. If you honestly can't tell that difference, then stay the fuck home and don't vote, please. That is my only. I mean, I'm not even telling you. Just don't vote.
That. You're doing the 30 Rock. And then I was going to say the funny thing is, Donald Trump's someone that's shown up regularly on WWE, and at this point, a lot of the stuff he's doing now is out of bounds for WWE. So that is definitely amusing. Okay, Brian, why don't you get your shout-outs in? I'll get mine, and then we can blow this joint and go home.
Sure, I've got a lot of shout-outs, but just politically, I hate to say it, guys, but in our 3 states, it doesn't even matter. Since national vote doesn't matter. We're all going Democrat no matter what, so feel free to vote for whoever you want, despite Scott Walker. Yeah. All right, here's some of my shout-outs. So we were talking about how bad the Olympics is, and a lot of the times, even though I'm going to be a hypocrite and watch it, there's another great esports event going on right now. Just started today with the group stages at Key Arena in Seattle. Starting this weekend is the main event. Group stages for the rest of the week. The Dota 2 International Championship 2016. And it truly is an international event. Even though China's been traditionally the best country, it's been won by, in order, Ukraine, China, Sweden, China, USA. So it's been all kinds of different countries. Southeast Asia has even had multiple top 8s. And the favorite team this year, OG, has players from Denmark, Jordan, Canada, Israel, and Sweden. So it is a real, Olympic-style event. And we can even peek into the stream here real fast and watch some of this. It's already going with 250 to 300,000 concurrent viewers across all the stream. The Russian stream looks like it's doing the best so far. So the Russians love Dota 2 apparently. And yeah, I'd say by far this is my close second favorite esports event of the year, behind Evo, which we just had, which is my favorite event. But this is a great event, and we've talked about the documentary too in the past. So yeah, esports this weekend for sure. My second shout-out is a personal shout-out. A friend of mine who's a great comedian here in the San Francisco Bay Area, Arthur Gauss, is helping to host an event called Maniac Bowl tomorrow night. So if you like comedy, and it's he describes it as a comedy game show. So yeah, it's going down tomorrow night. I'll be there. It should be a lot of fun. So those are my shout-outs.
So there you go. If you want to argue with Boxscore Brian, which is clearly what you should do at a comedy show. Yeah,
this is an arguing kind of comedy show. It looks like this is Maniac Bowl 2. I was not in attendance for the first one, but I think this one's going to be good. What they're trying to do, I think, is argue which political figures are the biggest maniacs. So Donald Trump will maybe involved. Who knows?
All right, my shout out pretty simple. I think This is a weird new world because I think I'm late to the bandwagon on this, even though I think it's been out less than a month, and that's the world of binge watching. My shout out is to Stranger Things. Really enjoyed it. My wife and I just finished it on Netflix. Haven't checked it out. Oh yeah, I heartily enjoyed it. With Game of Thrones ending, with it being the NBA off season, even caring about Major League Baseball for work, I can't care the same way I do about basketball. So this was a nice stopgap. Although as mentioned with New World, it is an interesting place where instead of having a mini series I might watch once a week that would cover 2 months, my wife and I finished it in 3 days. So, and that was more because she got tired. She kept falling asleep during it, which was maddening for me because I wanted to finish it. But it's really awesome. You should definitely check it out if you like 80s nostalgia, if you like horror movies, if you like good mini TV shows. Definitely check it out. All right, so that is our show. This has been the Boxscore Geeks show. If you didn't find us through our website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. You can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher at the Boxscore Geeks show. Subscribe, upvote, helps us out. We go live every week, usually 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, typically Tuesday or Wednesday. You'll have to follow myself, Nerd Numbers, Patrick Mitten, NBA Geek, or Boxscore Brian, Brian Foster. Sorry, I got the order of all three of those names mixed up, so just check the show notes if you don't know our Twitter handles. You have to follow those to know exactly when we're going live because, we have to schedule on a week-by-week basis. If you missed the live show on twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers, you can catch the recaps on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. Hope you enjoy your week, and we'll see you next time.